Welcome to NewsLINK, brought to you by the Camellia Rose chapter of the Links Incorporated. I'm Dr. Katrina Covington Whitmore, a proud member of the Camellia Rose chapter. The Links Incorporated is a service organization founded on two major principles: friendship and service. Friendships are formed, lasting, everlasting, enduring, inside, outside, and because of the Links Incorporated, through the many varied, fascinating people we come to know, in large part because of our second major principle, service. We focus much of what we do, the programs developed and implemented aimed at strengthening our community through 5 program areas called facets, because we work hard to make them shine like jewels. Those facets are the arts, health and human services, international trends and services, national trends and services, and services to youth. Of course, with the state of the world and America in particular, we also form committees that work on developing processes and making recommendations on issues impacting the community as a whole and the African American community in particular. One of those committees is for legislative issues, public affairs, and disaster recovery. Legislative issues are very much at the forefront now, and we will be discussing some of those issues with our 3 panelists who are experts in their area. And they're going to help us in sorting out what is a very complicated political landscape. And I'd like to thank them all for being with us tonight. I'm going to start by introducing Allegra Lawrence Hardy, Esquire. She is the Chief Advisor and the Senior Advisor and Chief Litigation Counsel for Fair Fight Action. Allegra is a member of the Buckhead Cascade chapter of the Links. Thank you for being with us. Next is a familiar face in local politics and human rights issues. Here it is truly a family affair. Andrea Young, Esquire, is with us. She is the Executive Director of the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. Like me, Andrea is also a member of the Camellia Rose chapter. And the last person that we would like to introduce is also from the ACLU, our third panelist. We're happy to welcome Fallon McClure, Esquire. Fallon is the Associate Director of the ACLU. We have a lot to talk about tonight, but let's start with learning a little bit more about the panelists. So Allegra, can you tell us a little bit more about Fair Action, what it is, what it does, and what you do as a Senior Advisor and the Chief Litigation Counsel?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me with you here this evening. Fair Fight Action is a national voting rights organization with its roots here in Georgia. And we are focused on engaging, protecting, and exciting voters throughout the process. And so Fair Fight Action has many educational programs. They do many voter protection programs. They work across Georgia in particular, as well as across the country, to make sure that voters feel empowered to vote and that they get all of the information they need to actively participate in the process.
Okay, and we'll be talking a little bit about what you're going to be doing in terms of this upcoming legislative session. Let's talk to Andrea about some of the issues the ACLU tackles.
Right. So thank you very much, Casey and Allegra and Fallon. Great to be with you this evening. You know, the ACLU, we've just celebrated our 60th anniversary in Georgia. We're part of a national federation of ACLU affiliates and a national office in New York. Our mission and vision is that we enhance and defend the civil rights and civil liberties of all Georgians through legal action, legislative and community advocacy, and civic education and engagement. We're inclusive, nonpartisan, and statewide organization powered by our members, donors, and active volunteers. And so we work on voting rights. We also work on a number of other civil rights and civil liberties issues, and we use litigation. People may often think of the ACLU in terms of our litigation team, but also we field a big team at the Capitol, and we also are very much involved in voter access work. And Fallon can also is directly leads our team at the Capitol in terms of our advocacy work.
Okay, Fallon, you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I feel like I'm the only non-Links member here. So I appreciate the opportunity. But so at the Capitol, we do a variety of issues, but our priorities are First Amendment rights and ensuring that everyone has the free speech, free exercise, all of those things, criminal justice reform, privacy and surveillance. We're entering a new digital era with our information, our data, with cameras and all of those things, and we want to protect our rights as it comes to that. And of course, voting rights. So those are the major issues that we do. We also, fight for civil liberties and rights in other areas, but those are some of our top priorities. Oh, and of course, access to healthcare. I don't know how I would forget that one.
And that'll definitely be something that we're going to be talking about as we continue to talk this evening. Before we get started, we'd like to mention that viewers are invited to submit any questions or concerns you might have, and our panelists will do their best to answer as many as they can, time permitting. Our discussion on the legislative issues that are, can, will be, and might impact our community begins with a special legislative session called by Georgia Governor Brian Kemp on November 29th of this year. At the top of the agenda was the redrawing of the state's legislative congressional districts. The redistricting happened after a federal judge ruled the current maps violate federal law. The session was called, the redistricting was done, the session ended, and now we're going to get an opinion from each of our panelists on how they would describe that just past session. Let's start with Andrea. We'll start with you.
So I would describe what the legislature did in the special session as obstruction. They were directed by a federal judge after 2 years of hearings to draw districts that more fairly represented the Black population of Georgia. This was under the Voting Rights Act. And the judge was very specific about the regions that should have new majority Black districts. The southern suburbs of Atlanta, where we know we have a lot of Links that live in Henry County, Fayette County, and so forth, and then also in the West, and then in the Macon area. For Links in the Macon area, there were to be 2 new majority Black districts drawn in that area, in that region. The legislature failed to comply, and so we now have the ACLU, other civil rights organizations are calling for the judge to essentially appoint a special master and draw his own maps, which is what happened in Alabama. We had hoped that the Georgia legislature would not be as archaic and as act like Confederates in the way that the Alabama legislature was, but we were disappointed, not surprised.
Okay. Allegra, how about you? What is your thoughts?
I could not agree more. Disappointed, but unfortunately not surprised. I really encourage our viewers tonight to take the opportunity to read Judge Jones's very thorough order. It's hundreds of pages long, where he really detailed the problems with the maps. He gave such specific instructions about what needed to happen, and they just completely ignored it. If we have it convenient, I have a slide that shows some key points of these different maps. So as Andrea said, there are both congressional and state house and state senate maps at issue. Here we had an opportunity. The judge told them to expand the Black voting opportunity. The judge was very specific about that. They failed to do so. They also created majority Black districts that exclude affected voters, thereby really diluting Black and brown voting power. In the state house, they dismantled 5 minority opportunity districts to create, quote, new majority Black districts, again, diluting power, and made 2 of the most competitive seats more vulnerable. Again, we're concerned there that there will be dilution of power. And the state center, the dismantling of districts. And the result of this is that we're going to see a legislature, if these maps are allowed to go forward, that would maintain the same balance of power, even though there's been exponential growth of Black and brown voters throughout our state. You can take the slide down. Thank you. And so these are obviously very, very significant concerns.
Mm-hmm.
The judge recognized how important it was to look at these maps quickly, given all of the activity that is coming to Georgia in 2024. So there will be a hearing on December the 20th. As Andrea said, we believe a special master needs to be appointed here because obviously they were given an opportunity to follow the court's order and they declined to do so. But I encourage our community volunteers, our servant leaders, everyone listening who's interested to think about going to court on the 20th. Think about making sure you're tuning in and really finding out what's happening there so that you can hear. It's very important that we bear witness to these types of activities, so people understand that they're not going under the radar.
So is this something that they're trying to do, or it's done and now we're fighting it?
No, we'll be in court on December 20th. The judge's order was open, so we didn't have to. So the judge essentially gave the legislature an opportunity to draw fair maps. They refused, and so now it is literally back in his court, where we will be asking him to appoint a special master, which is standard procedure in these circumstances. And there are maps we submitted even to the Georgia legislature. We submitted maps that fit the judge's criteria that had a minimal impact on incumbents and so forth. Because one of the other things that the maps the legislature drew would have done was actually hurt the chances of reelection of some of our experienced legislators that were the choice of Black voters. So part of this idea is to understand this is about Black voters being able to choose candidates of their choice. Whether that is, not necessarily that it's a Black candidate, but it's a candidate that is preferred by Black voters, that represents, the issues that Black voters have. So there will be a hearing in Judge Jones' court on December 20th. And I don't know if we can put up, I think it's in the Russell building down on Ted Turner. They keep changing the names. And so this will be the hearing where we hope that Judge Jones would appoint a special master to have these maps drawn in compliance with his order.
And Fallon, is there something that the community can do, community leaders can do to let them know that we are in favor of this map being redrawn and we don't agree with what's been done so far?
I think what's important for the community is that this has been an intentionally confusing process that's right before a presidential election. They make it kind of almost like a smoke and mirrors process so that people won't be involved and engaged. So I think to Andrea's point, one of the biggest things is just to watch and be vigilant and show up if you can on the 20th to the Richard B. Russell Federal Building. Look, if you've been to Mercedes-Benz or the Phillips, it's not Phillips Arena, State Farm Arena, then it's right down there in that area. And so hopefully, most people will be off of work then. So I think showing up is important. And that's one of the big things that the community can do. But so far, this judge has seemed to get it. And but it's still going to be up to him to appoint the special master or to accept the maps that were just, drawn in this special session. And so, we want to encourage him to do a special master and actually follow the guidelines that he already set out.
So far, we don't know what kind of an impact it'll have on the upcoming legislative session, the special session, or the redistricting yet. We're waiting for the judge to find that out.
Well, these maps would be to elect the legislature that is up for re-election in 2024. So the existing legislature remains the same. So whoever is your legislator today, your House or Senate member today, or a congressional member today,
Mm-hmm.
will continue to be until January of 2025. So that doesn't change right now. But just a flag of how defiant the legislature was. Lucy McBath's district was dismantled a second time. So Lucy McBath, when she initially ran, this was never intended to be a Black opportunity district. She ran and won anyway. And of course, in 2020, they dismantled her district. And she ran in a neighboring district and won again. And in this session, the Washington Post referred to it as whitewashing her district. So that's how defiant
Mm-hmm.
the legislature has been when it comes to, Black representation.
So they're not adhering to the spirit or the letter of the law, the way things are going.
Well, and may I also add that the process was extremely problematic as well. And that's part of why the December 20th hearing is so very important. And I will say, having been before Judge Jones, he is always delighted to have voters in his courtroom and will always make room and be very respectful of them as his guests in his courtroom. He really does believe it is the people's court. So folks should absolutely not feel intimidated about going down. But what was so troubling about the legislative process was the opaque way they went about redrawing these maps. So normally, there should be some transparency. We should have lots of committee meetings, hearings, et cetera. A lot of that just really didn't occur here. And so we don't even have the legislative record, right? We didn't hear from the people who were opposing these maps in the way that we should have, et cetera. So when you think about how this history gets recorded, right, where we are in this moment and what this looks like for our children and our grandchildren and for the civil rights fights they will have to fight, it's really important that's why I spoke earlier of bearing witness, right, that we actually take the time to get in the record this information. And that hearing on December 20th will be extraordinarily important for making that record, because that record was not able to be made. This was, intentional. The record was not able to be made during this special session.
Do we have a time? Do you know for the December 20th? Does anyone know what that time is? We'll see if someone can look that up while we continue to move on. So this kind of moves us into talking about the 2024 legislative session, which is just weeks away. And we see how volatile things are going to be already. So it just looks like it's just going to be a very volatile session. This legislature is said to be the most diverse ever, with 69 members listed as having non-white racial identities. Angela, let's start with you, but any of you, please feel free to join in at any time. What is the particular legislation, or what is it that we should really be paying a particular attention to this legislative session?
I'm going to defer to Fallon on this question, as she is my floor manager. She's my manager when it comes to what's happening under the Gold Dome. But before I do also want to flag there, we actually also did get some good redistricting news in Cobb County, that Cobb County School Board had been gerrymandered to prevent basically a majority Black school board. And we are, and so the judge has ruled that it was a racial gerrymander and that maps have to be redrawn for January 10th for Cobb County, so that the Cobb County schools can be representative of the school, the population, and the diversity of Cobb County. So folks who live in Cobb County, keep an eye out for that. You're going to have an opportunity to elect more, people for the school board, that actually are, have the interests of the education of children in advance. And I know Fallon is a long time. Are you a native of? Were you born in Cobb County? Yeah, so she's a long time Cobb County girl. So, but Fallon on our docket for legislative session.
Some of our biggest priorities are we're facing the rollback of the criminal justice reforms that we saw under the Deal administration, and that we saw kind of like post George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery. We saw this push to find like, or to try to have a reckoning with like racial justice and some of the laws in the criminal justice system. But unfortunately, we are seeing a lot of rollback of that as of late. Reintroducing mandatory minimums, actually trying to end cash bail across the board, in which we know evidence shows that, it leads to better outcomes when people have the opportunity to deal with their cases outside of a jail versus being still in the jail. So just a lot of stuff around criminal justice reform, which is just really unfortunate. We're kind of in a defensive posture there. But then also some of the other things that we are looking at, we're hearing it might be the time to finally expand Medicaid, which is going to be very important, as Georgia is one of the last states to do that. And that will have substantial impacts on especially the rural healthcare system, as we saw so many hospitals and things have closed across the state. I mean, we've even had hospitals closed right here in the city of Atlanta. And so expanding Medicaid is long overdue, and we hope that would ease some of the burdens in the rural areas, but also perhaps start the conversation to, close the gap in the Black maternal mortality rate that we have here, which is one of the highest in the countries, if not the highest. And then also along with that access to medical care, we're continuing to fight bills that are, limiting women's ability to choose what's best for them and their family. They've been taking away decisions that are probably extremely hard decisions for people to make that should be made within one's family, or and making it some women having impossible decisions to make, especially around the current abortion ban, which only, at 6 weeks, many women don't know that they're even pregnant at that point. So to already have made a decision on what's best for you. And so, we're continuing to watch those type of things. But another big thing that we're looking at and seeing is, the attack on First Amendment rights. And that kind of actually overlaps with the criminal justice piece, in the sense that we're seeing a lot of criminalization of protesting, people just exercising their First Amendment rights, but being, charged with, felonies and things that can have a substantial impact in your life. But it's also, a fear tactic. And I know I'm kind of like going, but there's just so many things. But it's one of the things that I always thought about when I was younger, because my mother, I love her, but she was always like, our history as Black folks didn't start with slavery. And she was very much like, you can't know where you're going if you don't know where you come from. And so like I could read other books. I was really into mystery novels. But if I wanted to read a mystery novel, I had to read a book on some type of Black history. So whether it was Nat Turner or, Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement, et cetera. But I say that to say, I always wondered what I would be doing if I lived in those times. It was always like this idea in my head of like, oh, what would I have done if would I have gotten off the bus? Would I have, boycotted, et cetera? But I bring that up because those are literally, we are fighting the same things again, right? This like regressive policies across the board that are stripping humanity and pitting people against each other through, class, race, et cetera. And that's essentially like what we're fighting at this legislature. It's just that whole like rewriting by the Daughters of the Confederacy. It's like come back again through book censorship, through, limiting access to medical care, through, we think about the vagrancy laws, and now, how we're over policing minor offenses that are leading to overcrowding. So I will stop there, but it's all interconnected. And those are all the things that we're watching and more as we try to protect their civil liberties at the Capitol. I'll let some other people talk, but then when we come back, we do have some offensive things that we're trying to get past. We don't have to always be defensive.
Okay, so Allegra, your focus is just a little bit different, I think. So what are you looking at?
Well, I do want to say this based on just following up with what Fallon was saying, and I wanted to cheer. You talk about what would we do? Would we have gotten off the bus? Would we have, supported the movement? And then what do we do now, right? And one of the things that is so striking to me is that I am raising a daughter who will have fewer reproductive rights than I had my entire childbearing years, right? That is just a very sobering fact. So what you say has no hyperbole whatsoever in it. And so I think we have to follow lots of different things, and I'll talk about some of them. But also, particularly, I'll speak to my Link sisters out there, all the leaders, all the community leaders, whether Links or not, who are out there. We also have to bring our issues, right? So I don't know that anyone's going to do anything um, from the party in power to try to support Black women's health. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't show up at the Capitol and talk about it every single time, right? We should be talking about medical choices for our children without someone outside of the family being able to interfere, right? We should, if those things are important to us, we should be talking about them every single time. Links are very interested in mental health, right? So whether other people are talking about it or not, we know for us, that is a priority, and so we want to be able to express that. So I know we'll talk later about how we might engage with our legislators and how we can make our voices heard. But those are all things I encourage everyone to figure out what's important to them, because as the community leaders, we bring that to our lawmakers, right? They want to know, they need to know what are the issues that are really important. So to your point, Katrina, Casey, one of the issues that Fair Fight is very, very interested in is around mass voter challenges and around the anti-voter legislation that has continued to proliferate throughout Georgia as a precursor for other states. So I just want to mention SB 202, which came along in 2021. And you all may remember SB 202 had various provisions that we thought were very much anti-voter. And what was interesting, of course, is that Georgia was one of the first states. You all remember this. After 2020, there ended up being anti-voter provisions that happened in various places across the country. Georgia was the tip of the iceberg in many ways, much like you're seeing in Florida now around education. Georgia was sort of the testing ground for some of these anti-voter bills. And in fact, since Georgia passed SB 202 in 2021, 41 bills have been enacted in more than 25 states with similar anti-voter provisions. All right, so let no one be mistaken that Georgia is at the eye of the storm in many, many ways, right? And they test it out. If it works here, if they can get get it through here, then they try it in other states. So you now have more vote by mail limitations across the country. You now have more limitations on drop boxes. Remember, we were so happy to have those during the pandemic. And then all of a sudden, so many restrictions were placed on them so that they make them much more difficult to use. Private funding. You all may remember in 2020, we had millions of dollars that came in to help elections officials. You all remember how hard it is to get elections officials to come work. We had millions and millions of dollars that came in from private industry to support local election officials, some of the hardest working people you will ever meet. But what, of course, happens? That means more people can vote, right? When there are more resources available, when there are more machines, when there are more employees. So what do we get? 27 bills prohibiting state and local election officials from accepting private grants for election administration. 27 bills. And then, of course, we have various other things. North Carolina has codified, for example, mass voter challenges. And I want to just take a moment to talk about this because it is something Fair Fight Action is spending a lot of time on, as is the Fair Fight PAC. It used to be that a voting challenge, and Casey, if you'll give me just a moment on this, because it is a little complicated and people lose track of it, and that's why it works. So it's worth just taking a minute to explain. It used to be that voting challenges were made by neighbors. I would come in and say, you know what, I know Casey, she's still on the list, but I happen to know she moved to California last year, so she shouldn't be voting anymore. And they would say, oh, thank you for letting me know. And they'd write a note to Casey, and you could either come in and say, no, I really live here, my neighbor just hates me, Or you could say, you're right, I moved to California, I forgot to tell you, right? They were done, it was meant to be neighbors, people who knew people, etc. Well, in 2022 is where we saw this incredible, really 2020 is where we saw the first, the beginning of this wave of people coming in and challenging thousands and now hundreds of thousands of voters. And in fact, since the 2022 election, over 100,000 have been challenged just in Georgia, right? Over 100,000. Prior to 2020, we had 375,000 challenged. And so when you have these numbers challenged, I want you to remember that the presidential in Georgia in 2020 was won by around 11 or 12,000 votes, right? Between 11 and 12,000 votes. And so when you have hundreds of thousands of voters challenged, you have the ability to really affect the margins. So what does it mean to be challenged? Well, if you're challenged, Casey, you'll get a letter in the mail that says you're challenged. You need to come do something to show that you're really living where you live. So I just want everybody to take a moment and think about the last time they opened every letter in their mailbox. Because I can tell you what we know, people who work voter protection lines, right? So those of us who answer the phone when voters call can tell you a lot of people never see that letter. A lot of people never see that letter. And so how do we fix it? Well, until the legislature does something about it or a judge does something about it, Fair Fight actually, along with some other grassroots organizations, sued one of the big mass challengers, and we are waiting for an order. We hope that the judge will send them out of Georgia. But in the meanwhile, self-help, of course, is a very important part. And it means we all have to constantly check our voter registration. That means we have to check it to make sure the state hasn't purged us, to make sure someone hasn't mass challenged us. The way they can challenge now is they'll literally buy lists and challenge everybody using whatever search criteria they use. And as you can imagine, what our research has found is that Black and brown voters get challenged more often than other voters. And so it's really important that you are constantly checking. So in the same way, when you get together with your family over the holidays, in the same way you might, show them a really funny YouTube or TikTok video that you really liked, you might do that after dinner, hand it around and show everybody. It's a great time for everyone to go to peachvote.com and check their voter registration, right? Go ahead, make sure you get those young people who are at Christmas dinner as well. We really need them. We really need them to check, right? Have everyone constantly checking, because it's really the only guarantee that when you show up, you'll still be on the rolls.
Okay, and you said that's
peachvote.com.
Peach Vote, PEACH, like the Georgia peach, and
Correct.
vote.com.
And in Georgia, you can register to vote online. So some of your young people that haven't registered, if they're going to be 18 by November, they can vote and they can register, in the election for 2024. So I think we just got a note from Melanie saying the case will be 2020 at 9 a.m. courtroom 1907 in the Richard Russell Federal Building downtown on Ted Turner. So
Okay,
thank you
so
for looking
9 o'clock.
looking that up. And I just want to reiterate, we so also we with our voter access project, along with other organizations, monitor the county boards of elections. These people, they bring the challenges at the county board. And as Allegra pointed out, this, and to understand, this is on top of the purging that's done by the Secretary of State's office. So this is in addition. So if you get a letter that, I know we get a lot of trash mail and we open it up and it's somebody trying to, buy our mortgage or sell us something. But we do have to open these letters and make sure that it's not from the Secretary of State, that it's not about our voter registration. Because if they send you something and no one responds, then, that's one of the ways that they take you off. So I definitely appreciate Allegra bringing that up. Some of the good news is that I think we will be, we've had some positive rulings about SB 202, with regard to being able to give people, refreshments, waiting in line. A lot of our organizations, they like to have a party at the polls. My grandmother used to do that in Marion, Alabama. She would set up a table out in front of the courthouse, and and you could get cookies and lemonade on your way out. You couldn't get them on your way in. Get them on the way out. So because it's a celebration of our democracy. So we do have some relief on that, line relief, and we will be continuing. But in the meantime, as Allegra says, we have, what I've been saying to folks, and I'll say it again before this is over, you got to plan your vote like you planned that Beyonce concert. And there is much more at stake. I'm looking at you, Fallon, who went to Paris to see Usher.
She's calling you out, Fallon.
But we have to think of. This is.
I always vote, for the record.
Really, always this is always. We had an important school board election just recently in Atlanta, where we had, a young African-American man running for school board. And if people had not come out in the runoff in December, we would have had somebody back on the school board who didn't want to raise teacher salaries. So these offices matter. They really matter. And we can, to talk a little bit about that, as well. But I know, Casey, you have your.
Yeah, well, I was just, this is just a perfect time to emphasize the importance of voting, of registering to vote and getting out to vote, and talking about the consequences if you don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We have, so at every level, the good news and bad news is that we have a democracy. But democracy is not a spectator sport. You cannot sit in the stands and watch it go by. You have to get in there and participate. And in Georgia, they ask us to vote a lot. There'll be probably 5 elections next year. But the people who show up, and especially who show up for those primaries and the runoffs, have a tremendous impact. We have elections that are decided by a few hundred people. And what difference does it make? Do we have the Medicaid expansion, right? We're losing hospitals, we're losing doctors. We have half our counties don't have anyone who can deliver a baby, so we have a very stressed and strained healthcare system. And that is a choice of the people currently in the legislature and the governor for it to be that way. Georgia is a wealthy state that acts like it's Mississippi, but we have the 8th largest economy in the country. We have resources to do all the things you want for your family, and and for your kids. We could investing in the things that really help people thrive. So one of the things coming up is the Medicaid expansion. All the links are being taxed for Obamacare, and we are not getting it, right? And so that means when you go to McDonald's or the nursing home person that's taking care of your grandmother, they cannot afford health insurance because we don't get the subsidy that is part of the Affordable Care Act. So these are things that matter. These are things that can be changed. In Cobb County, they fired the teacher who read a book that the children wanted to read. Something about I'm purple, and they said, "Oh, this is promoting being gay or something." And they, the teacher panel, her peer panel, recommended corrective action. This gerrymandered school board, with 3 old white men on it, recommended that this brilliant young teacher, dedicated teacher, be fired. This can change, when people vote. These are the kinds of things that, from the very local level of school board all the way up to our members of Congress. And we know the difference it makes to have, Warnock and Ossoff as our senators. That impact, happens all through, at every level of government when people get involved and vote.
Okay. And so what, again, we as leaders and the public at large, what can we do to assist in getting that Medicaid, Medicare expanded? I mean, how do we change the focus of the way things are right now?
So I think it's just incredibly important that we are engaging. And I know we're going to share information on how you can visit your legislators, call your legislator. You know, they should get to know you. They should know when they see your name in their email box, they should say, oh, it's so nice to hear from KC again, right? I've gotten to more great information because she's out as a servant of the people. She's talking to the people. She knows what's happening, and this is important. The expansion is important. I also want to say is that I take as a given that everyone who has already been with us for 41 minutes of this evening or whenever they're watching this is probably voting, right? I'm guessing there are a lot of super voters who are spending their time watching this, but I want you to know, people who are not super voters. The good news is that in Georgia, we have been growing super voters, particularly Black and brown super voters. So we have more than we ever had before. But if you want to figure out if we really have a lot of room to improve, look at that school board turnout, right? There's still lots of opportunities for us to really get folks in the habit. You'll hear me remind us again to talk with young people, right? To make sure we're taking every opportunity. They want to be asked for their vote. They want to be asked to engage and to participate. We need them. They will be able to decide the outcome of many, many issues. And so even if you yourself are a super voter, and I assume all of our listeners are, all of our viewers are, if they can just start thinking when they are interacting with the folks in their lives, whether those people are super voters, what information they need, what issues are important enough to them to go through what I promise will be some inconveniences in 2024. Again, we will be the eye of the storm. And so for some people, it will be easy. And for some people, it's going to be rough. They're going to have to work hard or take off work or stand in line or do other things to be able to vote. And so we want them to understand what issues are important enough to them that they'll plan for it like a Beyonce concert. I'm totally going to steal that.
Absolutely. And Fallon, in terms of the upcoming legislative session, what are some things people can do to be involved and stay current?
I think, well, both of our organizations have, listservs and websites that all in our social media that issues action alerts, but also we send out emails trying to keep people apprised of what's going on. Most organizations have lobby days. Our first lobby day will actually be on the first day of legislative session. So that's January 8th. We're doing Constitution Day. We're going to hand all the legislatures constitutions, little mini pocket ones, to remind them of like their roles and their responsibilities. So we would love to have folks join us for that. But, I'm joking, but I'm serious, right? Just showing up down there. A lot of times so much stuff happens because they're like, there's no one in these committee meetings. There's no one calling certain legislators to the rope, or no one that looks like us, right? And so they're like, I don't have to worry about that. I don't care about that because it's not going to have an impact. And so showing up at the actual legislator, but also showing up at the polls, like really shows our power. And we have so much of it. But I think a lot of it is just, some of it is like, we just don't know, right? I just think about, my parents and stuff that would want to, I think my parents are more engaged than average, but still was just like, my mom works in business license from 8 to 5 every day, right? So going to the legislator is like, it's something you have to really think about. How do you do that? How do you show up? When do you show up? But that's why you also can, you can call them, you can email them, you can tweet them, you can, there's all these ways to put pressure. But if you do come down to legislature, someone from our team is pretty much there every single day. If you come while they're in the chambers, you can go to the ropes. They'll send where you fill out a little paper. It sends them a note. They'll come out to the ropes and talk to you. And I encourage people not just to talk to people that they think that they like or that they think would align with them. I would encourage people to talk to, sponsors on bills that, you think you might have a different position on.
Mm-hmm.
I know when we were working last year on the state version of the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, because I'm not sure how much y'all know about that, but it went into effect on the federal level to provide protections from discrimination for pregnant women so that they don't get fired and other things that have been happening. But there was a state level effort for that as well. And the sponsor was someone that you probably wouldn't think we typically would align with, right? But his mother had an experience when she was pregnant, and it was very personal to him, right? So he introduced the legislation. So a lot of times I think we have a lot more in common with folks than we realize. And unfortunately, we've become so decisive where we're not even like willing to talk to people on one side or the other, or it's you're too much in the middle, you're too far on the left, you're too far on the right, you're too something. Like everyone is too something. But I think the more common ground that we reach and the more conversations that we have, the more that we can move stuff forward. And I don't say that lightly, and I don't think it's going to be easy, but it's something that we have to do.
And you can, and you both don't take for granted that people that you think are, you may think, well, you're a member of the legislature, they know what to do, they don't need to hear from you. That's not true. We know the choir always needs rehearsal, and people, we have caught folks trading away things that we thought they should know better, but if they don't hear from somebody that they like, I know one of our legislators is trying to get some standards and oversight of homeowner associations. I think Donzella James, right? You can think, oh, well, this is, these are things that impact people's lives. They can lose their house. They get behind on their fees. So everybody, the choir always needs rehearsing. And for those of you who are represented by someone who's not Black, one of the strategies that we can use, if people get enough pressure and they know it's not an easy vote, they just won't vote at all. And in the Georgia legislature, you need a certain threshold. Is it 91 votes for something to go over? So sometimes what we've done is just, maybe you can go to the bathroom during this vote because Miss Rural Georgia Link called me up and told me that she was watching me, and so I'm like, I don't really want to, I'm not that invested in this issue. So I will just take a walk and say, oops, rather than take any heat for it. So there are a lot, everybody, your voice really does matter. And because not so many people are contacting legislators, and people also know when they hear from you, you represent so many communities, you're in touch with so many communities, in your work, in your family, in your church, in your civic engagements, that you have, you're speaking for so many folks, and you can really do not underestimate the kind of impact that you can have. And it's, when you are, especially when it's something where you volunteer, something where you have a personal interest. I mean, President Obama basically dedicated his entire presidency to getting the Affordable Care Act because his mother died and spent her last months dealing with medical bills. And so, the things that are personal, and as Fallon said, this Republican member of the legislature who, because his mother had trouble when she was pregnant, how do these people pass an abortion ban and they will not protect pregnant women on the job? This is how crazy they are. They just, as your grandmama used to say, common sense ain't common. So, you may think some of these things are obvious,
right?
But they clearly are not.
And what do you say to those people that have kind of a reluctance to approach their legislator, like they won't be listened to, or their opinion doesn't really do anything to impact what's going on? How do you respond to them?
Well, I have one sexist thing to say, which is that all these guys like good-looking women. I don't care what they say. So if a good-looking woman approaches them, it will have an impact. You should not underestimate. And then I'm sure that I'll let Allegra and Fallon say something serious.
Either one of you.
I'll just remind us that folks should, can engage in whatever ways they feel most comfortable. So yes, you can go talk to them, but if you would rather, as Fallon said, you can, send them a tweet. You can email them. I mean, don't ever underestimate the power of emailing somebody 5 days a week, right? Or once every Monday morning. Just start your week with an email reminding people of the importance of mental health or of maternal health, or of all the many incredible issues that we have facing Georgia right now. So yes, if you're an extrovert and want to go have a conversation, by all means, you should go have one. As Fallon says, her team is down there. Fair Fight also has a political team down there. Lots of folks would love to see you. But also you should feel completely comfortable if you'd like to do a letter in longhand. They read those too. Right. And remember, you can make phone calls. There's probably someone there keeping a little record of who calls on which issue. Right. So you may not even have to ever talk to the person. You may talk to an assistant or an aide of some sort where they just can go ahead and list, this person really does support expansion. This person really does support reproductive rights, etc. So make your voice heard in whatever way is most comfortable for you.
Okay, and before we get to the question and answer, we have some viewers who have some questions for us. Any kind of a call to action for the people that are listening? What can we do? What should we do? How can we get fired up to make a change, a needed change in what's going on?
I'll say for us, we have a couple different ways. Like I mentioned, we'll have several lobby days, the first being January 8th, but we'll have on various topics throughout session, and that's one way to get involved. You can make sure you're on our list, on our Every Action list, where we send out updates all throughout session. But another thing that we have is that we relaunched recently is our Freedom Schools, and there are volunteer trainings, but we have different components of it, like how to lobby, where we sit down and, in more detail, how to talk to legislators, or what should you look for if you go to a board of election meeting and get information, and just various different ways to get involved, but that meet your particular interests and everything. And so, we have those orientations quarterly. And then from there, there's a bunch of different opportunities where you want to come down to the Capitol, and then you just wear a blue vest that says legal observer, it helps people feel more comfortable about, when there's protests and various things happening. It's not a peacekeeper, but it's just to have eyes there, watching things that are happening. But, we also have, folks out at polls and things of that nature. And just to Allegra's earlier point, I'm actually an introvert. I don't like speaking, public speaking. I don't like all the things, but I do it because it's so important. And all these things are very important and they matter to me. So I'd also suggest you find your issue. It doesn't have to be every issue. Doesn't have to be your issue, right? Find the thing that moves you, and that's part of your story of self, so that you can have very honest and open conversations with legislators and other electeds about it. And then and that's the issue you work on. We can't be all things to all people all the time,
right?
So just find your thing.
So how do we find out about the bills that are coming up that might be of interest to us? How do we look them up? And then who do we contact? How do we get that
information? So if you go to acluga.org.
Yes, we're going to have a brand new thing called Fast Democracy that will link all the bills that we're watching. It'll have talking points in there. It'll have click-throughs if we have actions where you can just use a click-through to send emails or tweets or whatever to your representative. We're going to make it really easy for you to stay involved and engaged with the things that we're watching, which is a variety of topics.
Okay.
And we will continue. We will come back, because we're going to be doing this through the session, Casey.
Right.
So we will come back and keep you updated on where things are, and what some of the, as things emerge, and what some of the really urgent things are. So we definitely want to keep you engaged and keep you involved. And I would really encourage people, the first day of session is really very, is kind of happy. Come down and hand out constitutions, right? It's nothing confrontational about it, but it is an important reminder to them of, their duty, and also who they represent, the people that they see. The electorate in Georgia now is over 40% people of color. And I mean, it's one of the things we haven't emphasized enough. Georgia is a diverse, multicultural, multi-religious state. We are smack dab in the middle of the global economy. If you go down to Savannah now, you can't, I mean, the Kia explosion is growing. You go another direction, it's Rivian. You go north, it's another thing. You go to the airport, it's every language literally in the world. We are a diverse, multicultural, global economy, and we've got to start acting like it. And our legislature has got to start being responsive to that reality. We have a Nigerian caucus in the Georgia State Legislature. We may have as many Asian Pacific Islander members of the legislature, almost as many as California, which I find to be shocking. But we are diverse, but we're not getting the bang for our buck. And we, let's face it, Metro Atlanta is the economic engine of the state. We don't get the bang for our buck. And, this is we need to understand that we are what's really driving. Nobody comes to nobody comes to Georgia for whatever they're selling out in Talcott County, right? They come for the hip hop, they come for the entertainment, they come for the civil rights, they come for the diversity. And we need to get that front and center in our state politics.
Okay. Any closing words? Let's get closing words from each of you. We're getting close to the end of our hour. It's been wonderful. So Allegra, we'll start with you.
Well, I'm just going to take my opportunity to plug my call to action, which is to please go to fairfight.com and consider signing up to volunteer, getting on our mailing list, etc. As I said, come down and hang out with folks at the Capitol. We hope that you will really pay good, close attention to everything going on. For the links out here, we hope you'll decide to come to Links Day at the Capitol, where we can make our collective voices heard. And we look forward to coming back again and continuing to talk with you all about the important work this session.
Great. Well, I will also reiterate acluga.org. Is that the right place now for Fallon for signing up for newsletters? We'll have the all the different ways to get involved on a variety of important civil rights and civil liberties issues. And one of the great things about Georgia is that, we work together. So we have ACLU, Fair Fight, NAACP, People's Agenda, Planned Parenthood. We're all collectively working towards a Georgia where all of our kids can thrive, a Georgia that Dr. King and Mrs. King would be proud of. So, come and be a part of it, and, really be a part of the change and making Georgia be the place that we know it can be.
And someone, Allegra, I'll let you plug Links Day at the Capitol that's coming up. We don't have an exact date yet, but it's something that people can really be a part of and get involved with.
Absolutely. And for those who haven't done it, it's a really powerful day to come and join with all the servant leaders of Links as we work together to learn more and to make our voices heard. So we really encourage folks to join.
I think pencil in February 4th and 5th. Put that in your calendar. I don't think the powers that be have totally blessed it, but save those dates and so that you don't plan anything else.
Right. Save the date, and we will have an additional podcast before then, and hopefully we'll have that firmed up, and we'll be looking to see all of you all here again because there is so much that we can talk about. The Voting Rights Act, how it's coming under attack and what we can do about that, and some of the issues that are also coming up, focusing on specific bills. So thank you all so much for being here. I think that this was really informative. I think that it was interested, and I think we all learned a lot about what we're doing and what we can do and what we can look to see happen in the upcoming legislative session. So thank you all so much for being here. Thank you much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'd also like to thank our viewers for tuning in to our NewsLINK podcast. I'm happy to say this is just the first of many. There will be lots of discussion on these vital issues. We'll highlight some of the programs the facets are spearheading. There'll be more live streaming, and we'll even mix in a little bit of fun. We look forward to seeing you in January of 2024. A recast of this program will be available on YouTube, and we will see you all next time.
Thank you.